Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of our webinar series, Business Insights from Women in Tech. My name's Claire Cox. I work on the business development team here at Scott Logic. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a technology company with offices in London, Bristol, Newcastle, Edinburgh, and Copenhagen that specialises in developing bespoke software solutions for our clients. So over the series of 6 webinars, we've invited some of the most prominent women working in the tech industry today from a variety of organisations to share their business insights with us. They'll be covering a wide range of topics, including how businesses can prepare for a post-COVID future, how to create an environment in which female talent can flourish, and how to tackle big challenges in small steps, which Charly will discuss today. Then at the end of this series, we'll be holding a panel discussion to discuss issues around diversity and inclusion. So if you'd like to be notified about the next webinars in this series, please fill in the survey at the end of the webinar and we'll send you a link to register when each of the next webinars are announced. So before we get going, a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, if you'd like to ask a question, you can pop these into the question box and we'll take as many as we can at the end. And if you'd like a copy of today's slides, just pop a comment in there too, and I will be happy to send you a copy after the webinar. So without further ado, let me introduce you to today's speaker. Charly Lester was the co-founder and former CMO of Lumen, the world's leading dating app for over 50s. Lumen has over 1.5 million members worldwide and was Charly's third business. Previously, she established international awards for the online dating industry, and she co-founded a learning platform for female entrepreneurs. Charly is the author of 2 business books, has spoken at the Oxford Union, and was a guest judge on the final of The Apprentice. He regularly appears on TV, radio, and in the press, talking about entrepreneurship, dating, and equality. Charly also teaches classes in marketing and entrepreneurship at the Guardian newspaper. Outside of work, Charly competes in Ironman triathlons, runs marathons, and last year completed the Marathon des Sables. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Charly. 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert. So let me pass you over to Charly for what I'm sure is going to be a fascinating talk.
Good morning, everyone. So firstly, apologies. First time I've ever done a presentation with a dog on my lap. I've got 2 dogs, so if there's some weird barking in the background, I apologise. I've tried to kind of bribe them as much as possible. Okay, so today's webinar, I've tried to make this as applicable to everyone as possible. So basically, I've tried to slim down some of the ideas that I've talked about with companies that I've worked with over the years into sort of 5 key lessons that hopefully can affect you regardless of your role, whatever you're doing these days, and try and make it as applicable as possible. So just to give you a little bit of an overview to my career, as Claire mentioned, I've just exited my 3rd startup. So my first business was industry awards for the dating industry. I then ran online training to try and encourage more women to start their own businesses. And most recently, I've been running an over 50s dating app, which I've got some examples I'll be showing you throughout the webinar. So to kick things off, I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur, having had 3 businesses. I know it's a phrase that gets used a lot, but I think I can now call myself a serial entrepreneur. The first 2 of my startups were actually bootstrapped. So the first one I owned 100% of, second one 50% of, and so, well, you know, in those early days of the dating awards, I literally started my business with £500 in my pocket, and that got spent on my website, and then I had to wait to become profitable very quickly, otherwise I literally wouldn't have been able to do anything with the business, and luckily the model allowed me to. Nowadays, I now consult with businesses of all sort of shapes and sizes in various different capacities. But hopefully these 5 lessons will apply to you regardless of what you're doing and which industry you're in. So to show you, I wanted to have a bit of fun with this presentation, so I've tried to combine my sporting journey as well as my entrepreneurial journey. That picture is me finishing my first ever Ironman a couple of years ago in Copenhagen. For those of you who don't know what an Ironman is, it's a really long triathlon. It's a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and then you do a marathon at the end of that, all in one day. It took me just under 14 hours, I think. Some people compete them in like 9, their machines. The cutoff is about 17 hours normally. But yeah, so that was something that I built up to over the space of a number of years. I'd wanted to do an Ironman probably since I was about 21. I started talking about doing them. I'm now 36. I was 33 when I did my first, or 34 when I did my first Ironman, 33 when I did my first triathlon. And then last year I did Marathon des Sables, which I mentioned. This, I guess, is kind of my sporting challenges in one slide. I do a lot of marathons. I've recently started doing the 6-star marathons, which include London, which hopefully I'll get to run at the end of later this year. I've done a number of half Ironmans. I really like the half Ironman distance. It's quite literally half those distances that I talked about earlier. Marathon des Sables was something that a friend did a number of years ago, and I heard about and thought, okay, I could try this. 6 marathons, consecutive days across the Sahara Desert. On one of the days you actually do 2 marathons, say 50 miles, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Last year I also did something called the Polar Bear Challenge, which is around the Arctic Circle in Greenland, a half marathon followed by a full marathon. I've now done 2 Ironmans. My third one is booked in for later this year. And then I did some climbing too as a kid too. So I like challenges is probably the way to sum up this slide. A couple of pictures from last year. So I realised that I'm wearing the same buff in both those 2 pictures. That's probably the only item of clothing that was the same in the desert and on the glacier. If you look at my feet in that glacial picture, I'm actually wearing they're like snow chains that you put on your trainers to run on the glacier, which was kind of bonkers. So yeah, that's Marathon des Sables and the Arctic Marathon, just to give you a little bit of a visual of what those races look like. I think the first one I'm in 45-degree heat. They were worried it was going to get to 58, but I think it was around the mid 40s. And the second one, I'm guessing something like -10, -15. We had these little plastic cups, which all the drinks were warm because otherwise they'd freeze before you get to drink them. So yeah, that's kind of just a step into my spare time, I guess. Okay, so my first lesson. This is something that I think, because my first ever business was 100% owned by me, I didn't want to spend lots of money. I wanted to just test the idea and see if it had legs. This is something that I kind of learned very early on. Basically, bootstrap. Act as if every single pound is your own. Now, something I've noticed, because I work with a lot of large corporates, and when I was dealing with the dating awards, it was a B2B business, so I've got a lot of experience working with large companies. And one of the things I think is, the larger the company, quite often the more money that is available for stuff. And sometimes, because it's not your money, you might just go ahead and just sign something off that actually, you would think very differently if you were paying for it out of your own pocket. And I think that it can be really useful to keep this idea in the back of your head. Could you get this cheaper? Is this the best deal? Most recently, when I was working with Lumen, my co-founder, Antoine, is the best negotiator I have ever met in my life. And I think part of that is he has quite a thick skin, and I think he would admit that too. He doesn't really care what someone thinks of him. But he would come away sometimes paying 25% of what the original cost had been. And I'm not someone who's ever really tried to negotiate. So seeing him do that time after time on so many different things really made me realise how many opportunities there are really to negotiate. So I think that's really, really important, but also just having that in the back of your head, like, is this a sensible spend? If you were spending your own money, would you spend it in that way? Because when you're running your own company, quite literally the pound does come out of your pocket. Every pound you're spending on something else is a pound you can't take as a dividend or as a salary for yourself. So I think actually sometimes by applying that same logic to your job, regardless of where the money is coming, can be really useful. So each of these ideas I've tried to illustrate with some fun images from my career. So this is the first image that I'm going to use to illustrate that point. This is one of the first marketing campaigns I did for Lumen. our sexy Santa. And the reason I wanted to use this image actually is because this billboard cost us £500, and we could have, we could have obviously spent a lot of money. We had, at that point we had £3.5 million of seed investment. We could have spent a lot of money on advertising, and we decided, look, we're going to test this idea. We had this idea that this would be more of a PR stunt than a full kind of national campaign. And we wanted to see if it had legs. So what we did was we literally got a really last minute deal on this billboard, which is in Clapham in London. Really nice kind of visual on it. We paid this lady £300 to take this picture. Oh no, sorry, we paid her I think £50 to take this picture, and got this really nice shot that then was used everywhere. And I'll show you in a second. The coverage that this got was amazing, right? This idea that because he's 58 and no one shows over 50s as looking attractive. And so this is some of the coverage that ended up getting. The shoot itself cost us, going back to this idea of thinking like you're spending your own money, the shoot itself cost no more than £3,000 end to end, including the photographer, the venue, styling, all of the outfits that Santa wore, and the model himself. And then £500 for the billboard. And I think we got about 300 publications globally talking about this. We were on Good Morning Britain. Piers Morgan was literally saying, objectify me, I want to be objectified. There was this whole debate about whether it's objectification, because we actually got banned from advertising on the tube because he was topless. So it turned into this absolutely huge story at very little spend. So I think sometimes just actually being a bit savvy and thinking like a startup with your spending can really work. And just to be aware, obviously I was CMO, so a lot of my examples are marketing examples. I've also done marketing examples because they're all in the public space. But obviously I think you can apply this whatever area of the business you're working in. Okay, so my next point is testing. So this applies not only to A/B testing, which I'm a big fan of, but also just testing if something works or not. So a minimum viable product. That's basically a straw man of your idea, and the idea is to create this very basic version of whatever you're doing, whether it's a product, a marketing idea, whether you're testing Facebook advertising. Do it as small and as efficiently as possible, so it's taking as little time and effort from you, as little money from you. Actually test if it works before you then throw everything at it. And my example for this one, we've seen our Santa, which was our year one. This was Mrs. Claus. Those of you that are based in the UK will recognise her probably. This is Ulrika Johnson. She was a lot more expensive than the first model, and so that wasn't something that as a startup we would have spent money on if we didn't know that we'd actually prove the concept first, right? So we saw the coverage that we got that first year from Santa, and so then we decided to sort of change the narrative a bit, include a celebrity. We spent a lot of time really thinking about what celebrity we would use. Ulrika is someone who she has talked quite publicly about her love life. She's had quite a lot of public kind of mishaps in her love life, and so people in the age group that we were targeting over 50 had seen kind of all those ups and downs of their love life, and they kind of, I guess that they could empathize with her and actually believed her. And she was adamant when she said she'd do our photo shoot that she wanted to join our dating app too, so that became a story. This campaign was the biggest campaign that we did. It was the campaign we spent the most money on, but the return and the cost per acquisition, but this kind of was amazing, right? So actually to be able to do a really successful campaign, and the reason that worked was because the Santa the year before was our MVP on this, right? We'd already tested this premise. We even used the same location, like she's literally on the same staircase that Santa was the year before. We did everything exactly the same photographer, same tone of the adverts, and we just spent more money that time because we'd already proven the concept. Okay, so this might be a little bit of a bone of contention. I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what people say. So I have always tried to do stuff myself, basically first. My approach, from having come from a startup background, from coming from a bootstrap background, is try and be a jack of all trades. Work out, my first business I ran completely on my own. I would use friends to help me at events, but most of the year it was just me on my sofa on my own doing all roles within a business. And I think what that made me realize is that firstly, obviously, you do need to outsource stuff. You do need to get other members of staff if you have the ability to, but you need to think carefully about what you use those people for. Normally, it should be something that you're not very good at, or you know that is a waste of your talent, or you don't want to be doing. And you might find that there are things that you can do in-house a lot cheaper, a lot more efficiently. And one of the things I've realized, and I say this having literally been pitched to by so many agencies over the years, is that quite often, the agencies won't have that same passion, that same understanding of your product or your service. So if there is something that you can do yourself or try yourself, even if it's the ideation and then an agency actually delivers on it, then I think it's worth doing. So I wanted to show you a couple of examples of things that I've come up with myself, right? So when I first joined Lumen, I have never created an ad campaign before, right? My first business was B2B. My second business was just talking to individual entrepreneurs. I've never created a billboard. I never created a TV ad. And so kind of hit the ground running with the Santa idea, and then kind of just went from there. So this yeah, that's the message. Can you do it yourself? Is it a waste of time? This was one of my ideas, and I remember having this idea, literally writing it down on a post-it and showing the team. One of the things we're dealing with over 50s is that they're an age group that you just don't see enough, and they feel invisible, and that's a word that gets used a lot. And so I had this idea about, okay, well, you shouldn't have to get naked to be seen, but this is kind of the play on that. And these kind of campaign posters. I'm just going to say this is one of the weirdest days of my career ever, sitting in the corner watching a load of people who were in their underwear behind these scenes, but trying to make them look naked, particularly because the gentleman in the middle actually worked in the canteen at work, and is over 50, and we were like, Joel, come and do this shoot, because we knew he'd be brilliant. But it was quite funny sort of seeing all these people stripped down in their boxes. Not my average day at work by any stretch. So yeah, this is what one of the first campaigns. That was our first global campaign, actually. This is another one that I came up with the idea, which is basically there are some really amazing over 50s doing some really amazing things, right? So Dilys is 87, the lady in the skydiver, 87. She only stopped jumping out of planes aged 86. She stopped jumping out of planes. And when she talked to me about it, it wasn't because she couldn't jump out of the plane anymore. It's because she couldn't do the air acrobatics anymore without coming out of the loop. And she was struggling to get her body into the right position to come out of these really crazy twists. And she thought she was going to basically end up dying. Which is something, this is incredible, right? She has more chutzpah, and more energy than kind of most 20-year-olds I've met, to be honest. The lady in the middle, Dilys, was Edwina is the lady in the middle, the Ironman. She's Britain's oldest female Ironman. She did her first Ironman in her 70s. Started running at 50, and I think her husband passed away and took that up. Anyway, so all of these people have amazing inspirational stories behind them. And so they formed the start of my 50 is the start campaign, which we had ads all over the UK for. We also had ads in that's British Airways High Life magazine. I quite like the idea of having a skydiver in a magazine that was in an aeroplane. But yeah, these are just some of these examples of things these were ideas I had for myself. We used our team to style them. We bought all of the props and all of the outfits. Some of these guys bought their own stuff for this particular shoot. But whenever we do a shoot, we would style in-house. We'd do all of the booking. We'd find the models. We'd find, we had an intern who found Dilys. So my intern was like 17 or 18 years old and just found. I said, look, find me some inspirational over 50s. This did not need a creative agency. This is something we could do in-house very simply. I used the same photographer I've always used, who I used to work with when I worked at Time Out. And so we did. We would get costings for the stuff that we were doing, and they would end up being like 10 times the price of actually what we were doing ourselves. So I guess I want to really stress, I had never done any of this before, right? I just thought, let me see if I can do this. Let me see if my team can do this. If it doesn't go well, then then I'll spend more money and I'll bring in someone else next time. But let's at least have a go at this. And I think that's quite a good approach to have. Try and do it yourself. If it doesn't work, then okay, then rethink it. I had actually wanted to show you a TV ad I created, but we couldn't do it because of the technicals. But basically, we created 2 TV ads while I was at Lumen. One was a load of women who are in their 70s and 80s who are hip hop dancers dancing in these light suits, a bit like on kind of Britain's Got Talent. And there was basically this amazing dance routine, and then it's all in darkness with lights, so you can't tell who is dancing, and then the big reveal is that they're all over 50s. And we filmed that in Atlanta again. We filmed that, we came up with the idea ourselves, we did all of the prep work ourselves. My team flew out to Atlanta. We hired in the suits from a company that did these light suits, and we brought over a friend who was a videographer to film for a week in Atlanta. And then our second TV ad, which is a bit of a play, it's been on like play on Baywatch. It was kind of these cheeky firemen. Again, my team ordered all the outfits, found the location, did all the styling. I was the voiceover. If you ever watch the TV ad, it's just my voice. It just was a lot simpler that way. And so I think you'll be surprised what you're capable of doing. And actually, and this kind of applies to sport as I talk more about the sports side of stuff. You know, kind of when I trained for an Ironman, I started by doing a very short sprint distance triathlon, right? Like the swim was 400 meters. Swimming an Ironman is 2.4 miles. You've got to build up. I think you build up your confidence. You build up your, you know, you suddenly become more and more aware of actually what you're capable of doing. And you know, and it's like stepping stones. I kind of think that applies to all aspects of life. So get out of your comfort zone. Try doing something. Is there a job that you normally pay loads of money for that you think, you know what, I could probably do that myself? Because you never know where it would go. Like I really enjoy this aspect of my job. Really enjoy it. And I, you know, 2 years ago I would have never had the confidence to do that. Okay, so an Ironman's approach to big challenges. So here's the breakdown of an Ironman. So you swim, then you go into transition. Now transition, depending on the type of event, it will either be a rack or a tent where you literally change your kit. So you take off your wetsuit, your hat, your goggles, normally running into the tent, taking all those things off, got to hold on to them, dry them off a bit, dry yourself off, and then put on your stuff for bike rides. So bike helmet, socks, dry feet, socks on. Sometimes people don't wear socks, shoes. I mean, I'm a bit of a faffer in transition. I quite enjoy it. And then you get ready for the bike. Then you go on the bike, and you're back into the transition, sometimes in the same place, sometimes different place, and you're switching all your bike gear for your running gear, and then you run and then you finish, right? They are very separate things. Now, the reason I wanted to lay this out is because one of the best things I was ever told when I started first doing triathlons and an Ironman distance triathlons was by a friend who, probably at the time, my only friend that I knew that was doing this distance of triathlon. And she said one of the best things she'd ever been told was to keep your head where your body is. So if you're on the swim, you need to be maximizing on that swim. You need to be thinking about the strokes that you're making. And you know, if you're on the bike, your head needs to be with you on the bike. Do you need to drink something? Do you need to eat something? Are you pedaling fast enough? How much more of your of the bike distance have you got? Are you pacing yourself correctly? The minute that you start thinking ahead of yourself, that's the minute that you start losing yourself, right? Yes, you have that goal of the finish, but if your head is constantly at the finish and not where your body is, that's when you run the risk of doing stuff like not taking enough nutrients or going too fast or going too slow, right? There are so many variables between that start of that race and that finish of that race. And I think that's a really really important message for business. Now, I think I've always been someone who concentrates just on the next couple of steps, because I think I've always set myself such big challenges in business that otherwise, if I only looked at the finish line, at what I was trying, you know, at the end goal of the challenge, I would be so daunted by it that I would probably almost be too scared to even start. So I think it's really important that, yes, you do obviously need to know where you're going, but you know, when it comes to things like forecasting, for example, most forecasting is kind of guesswork anyway. So yes, you need to have those forecasts, but if you spend your whole time looking into the future and not looking at them now and the next step that's going to get you to that finish, that's when you're going to fail. And also when it's going to get far too scary and you're going to end up overwhelming yourself. And I've sat in rooms where the other person has been so overwhelmed by our end goal, and I'm kind of that voice that's like, it's fine, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? You just need to get those next few steps going, and then we look up and then we work out what the next few steps are, and then you look up again and you kind of keep going in that rhythm. So there we are, there's me crossing the finish line at my first full Ironman in Copenhagen. After 14 hours of consecutive exercise, I let myself have a 5-minute break where I got off the bike and had a sandwich and a bag of crisps all day. Yeah, crazy day. And but this is also something that's really important, and this is a good Ironman knows this too. Understand when something isn't working. I think it's really interesting, particularly in the entrepreneur space. There is a lot of ego, right? People don't want to admit when they make a mistake. And the thing I've realized is that a mistake is really only a mistake if you acknowledge it as a mistake. You know, otherwise it's just a learning point, and that is really genuinely true. When I ran the dating awards, they started as the UK dating awards. I then took them to the European mainland, and then I took them to America. And running a business in America is so different, and running an events company in America was so different. There were so many things I learned. For example, to hire this ballroom in New York was about 10 times more expensive than hiring equivalent ballroom in London. And then I realized that the cost didn't include the furniture, right? So every single piece of chair I needed to have was like an extra $2, and every table was an extra $5. And to have a sofa in the corner of the room was going to cost me another $200 to hire. I mean, it was kind of bonkers and really scary and really hard to even break even on that event. And for me, I mean, the events I'd previously run were like 280 people, and this event had like 25, and I was like, oh my God, this is an absolute failure. But actually the outside, no one else saw it as a failure. Like my staff who'd been at all my events said, you know what, this is one of the best events we've run. People like were so positive that went to that event, they loved it. You know, they didn't care, they kind of got better treatment because there were less people in the room. So it was really interesting actually. So you know, not everyone will understand, you know, you'll see something as failure, not everyone else will understand as failure. I did want to tell you a very quick anecdote. I know we're starting to run out of time. I do not finished a race once, DNF'd a race, and it was 39 degrees. It was a full Ironman, and they changed the course of the bike ride. And the bike ride was climbing 2,000 meters during the 112-mile bike ride. So I had been exercising for a total of 11 hours in 39-degree heat, and I was about to have to, no, 10 hours, sorry, and I was about to have to run a marathon, and I was already sunburned. And I actually said to myself, do you know what? I have done this distance before. I know I can do it. There is absolutely no point in me finishing this. I'm going to actually damage myself. And you know, I'm someone who normally finishes everything, and to step away from a race and literally just not even transition, not even start the run, was so unlike me. But I'm so glad I did it, because I kept myself healthy. I could then go and do the next race the next week, right? And there were a lot of people who end up in real bad trouble on that race, like literally like peeing blood. Like, you know, that's not a situation you want to be in a race, right? Like, they were so dehydrated. So actually knowing when something isn't working and being able to stop and kind of revise your goal, I think is a really important skill. Okay, final point, an ultramaratoner's approach to problems. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying about this idea of kind of taking it step by step. But also this is kind of an approach that I was taught by quite a famous ultramarathoner, Susie Chan. I've interviewed her a couple of times, met her in multiple times. She was the person who convinced me to do Marathon Star. Now, when she enters a race, she always has 3 aims. She has her basic goal, which is, you know, if everything, you know, that's all she wants to achieve. And normally basic goal is just finishing. Then she has like her on a good day goal and on an amazing day goal. And I think that's a really interesting way to approach things, right? When you're trying to achieve something, okay, what do I need to achieve? And what would be kind of the icing on the cake of that? And I think that's quite a nice way to go into challenges, to go into to businesses, to go into new projects, so that you're not beating yourself up, because actually, even if you get to point 3, then you've done your job and you've done it. I quite like that approach. So this is me at the finish line of Marathon des Sables. So I haven't had a shower for 7 days by the time this picture was taken. You may notice the cap is the same that I ran my first Ironman in. Bit of a Wonder Woman fan. This guy had such bad blisters on his feet that his entire leg swelled up. And we had to carry him on day 4 during the 50-mile stage between 4 of us. And the final day, it was a marathon, and marathon normally takes me about 4.25 hours max. It took me 11.5 hours to get him over the finish line. But I think like, and that goes back to that idea of kind of having this approach where you're just concentrating on the next few steps in front of you, and you're bearing in mind that conditions, right? It was like late, 45-degree heat. I've got a really injured person with me. What's the sensible way of approaching this? How am I going to get to that goal number 3, just finishing? I was actually meant to go back to the Sahara this year to try and see how many hours I can shave off my time, which I will now be doing next April, I guess. But yeah, I kind of like that approach, right? Like, we got to that finish line, and I got another person to the finish line, and actually my highlights from that race, bizarrely, and I've spoken to the other 3 guys who helped carry James that night, through the night, to a checkpoint, and all of us said that was the best part of the race, because it kind of felt the most adventurous, and it kind of felt that was when we really felt like we were doing marathon Saab. Okay, so I think we're over I'm dead on 10:30. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, there's quite a few questions coming in, Charlie. Thank you so much for that fascinating and inspiring talk. I will just give a quick plug to the next one in the series that's going to take place next week. You can see some of the details on the screen now in that final slide. So next Wednesday at 4 o'clock, different time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we've got Anna Barsby talking about creating an environment for female talent to thrive within your organisation. Now, Anna is the ex-CIO of Halfords and Morrisons, and she's now the managing partner and founding partner of Tessient. So she's going to be talking about all sorts of things, including why women typically get stuck in middle management roles and what we can do as organisations to prevent that from happening. So there's the link to join. Also, if you express your interest in the survey at the end, we can send you the link to your email as well. So let's have a look at some of the questions that are coming through now for you, Charlie. So here's a good one. If you were to start Lumen again, what would you do differently?
So the biggest waste of money, and this is not me who wasted this money, was on leaflet marketing. My co-founder decided in the very first month, sorry, someone slammed the door, so we might have a bit of barking. In the very first month, they decided to spend £35,000 on an agency to hand flyers out at the Royal Albert Hall, and it wasn't my decision. And if you apply my logic of MVP and testing stuff as cheaply as possible, personally, I would have taken the leaflets to the Royal Albert Hall myself, actually done a couple of days and seen if people take them before spending 35 grand on people handing them out, because there were so many lessons to be learned, including what was written on the leaflet. Because actually, if you're over 50 and you so if someone hands you a leaflet that suggests that you're either single or over 50, a lot of people take offense to that, bizarrely. So yeah, so there were lots of lessons there, but yeah, that would be the main one. That's the one that really sticks out in my head. And I guess it was because he wasn't applying my own rules to it, right? Which is what happens when you have a co-founder.
Great stuff. Here's another one. Which of all your sporting accomplishments are you proudest of, and why? And is there a parallel with your proudest business achievement?
So I think the Ironman, finishing that first Ironman, is something I'm probably proudest of, because it was something that I literally had talked about for almost 15 years. And I think because it sounded so scary, right? The idea of running a full marathon after cycling all day, swimming 2.4 miles, it's massive. But actually, once you realise how achievable that is, I have to tell you, so I finished in 13 hours 50. On the Friday night when I got to Copenhagen, most Ironmans have a cutoff of 17 hours. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to aim for like 16 hours. And then I looked at the literature, and the cutoff was either 14 hours 45 or 15, I think it's 15 hours 45. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to really hustle. So I'm really proud of that time, because it's about 2 hours quicker than I thought it was going to be. So that's probably what I'm most proud of. I don't know if there's a parallel. The thing I'm most proud of with Lumen was just actually like going out to Australia and launching out in Australia. Again, something I'd never done. I ended up coming straight off a 24-hour flight, straight onto breakfast television. And then when we launched in America, I did this, again, kind of 3 hours off a flight. This flight got delayed, ended up coming in at like 3 in the morning. straight into a video studio at 6 in the morning, and I just talked to camera, and I did 25 back-to-back news interviews where there wasn't even another human in the room. I just had an earpiece, and I just had to act like I was talking to the newsreader. So those are kind of they're probably like my standout moments. Again, just I think the parallel actually between the two is when you achieve something that you weren't sure if you were going to be able to or not. That feeling is amazing, right? When you realize what you're capable of, and then I think that spurs you on to do the next challenge, do the next thing.
So we'll take a couple more. I am aware that we've gone over time, but here we go. Let's squeeze in a couple more for those that can stay with us. So this person says, that was fascinating. Thanks, Charly. I've run marathons and entered a number of other endurance events, but nothing ultra. How do you fit the training into your life, particularly when solo running a company?
So I find the easiest thing for me to motivate myself is I always sign up to sort of virtual mileage challenges. So every month I'm signed up to things like Race at Your Pace, where you literally get a medal. It arrived in the post this morning actually for last month. So I'll set myself a certain number of miles that I want to run across the month. They've got that kind of carrot of the medal, and then what I do is I actually have a chart. I don't know if you can see it on the wall behind me. There's this coloured chart up there, and that's my one from last month. And what it is literally it's I colour in a square every time I run a mile, and that's amazingly geeky, but really inspires me. So I think it's fine. Firstly, it's finding stuff that inspires you, and then I think it's also working out what works for you. I'm a complete night owl. So I try and get all my work done, and then I'll go out for a run. I think in an ideal world, I would love to be like a really early morning runner. I'm just not a morning person, and I've over the years stopped trying to force myself to run in the morning because everyone else does. And then I think I suppose like actually this is a really interesting point, because I once got interviewed by this magazine, and they said, what's one thing you do better than other people? Which is a really hard question to answer about yourself. And so I asked my head of brand, she reported directly into me, and I said, what would you say? She spends a lot of time with me. And she was like, you're really good at making sure that you exercise every day and that you spend time with your friends, like compartmentalizing parts of your life and saying, do you know what, work stops here. And we travel abroad a lot together, and I would be like, right, come on, now we're going to the gym. So I think actually just adamantly making time in your day, for me, I find that then makes me more efficient, and I fit the work in because I know I've got something to go to. I know, I kind of almost treat the exercise like another meeting that I have to attend. So I guess, yeah, that's how I would fit it into a busy lifestyle.
Perfect. And I'm going to take one more question, and that is, what challenges are next in business and sport?
Okay, so sport, I've got another marathon with Sables to do. I'm going to try and shave 15 hours off my overall time, which sounds ridiculous, but because we obviously help that injured runner, I think that should be quite simple if I kind of pick up my pace a little bit. So that's now next April. I'd quite like to do, there's an ultra marathon, which again is a multi-stage, 5 days from the one coast of Costa Rica to the other, which is in February next year. Hopefully London Marathon is going to go ahead in October. I guess we'll find out soon. And then business, honestly, I'm not sure at the moment with business. So I left Lumen at the end of February, and I've been consulting for 5 different startups at the moment, which I'm actually finding quite fun. And it kind of fits right at the moment where we're all working from home. So actually just running a business that is just lots of Skype conversations and stuff kind of works out. But I guess watch this space.
Great stuff. Listen, I will forward the rest of these questions to you, Charly, so that you can engage with people. Everyone's obviously fascinated by the talk that you've just given, and lots of comments coming in just saying how inspiring and how great that was. So all that remains is for me to say thank you so much, Charly. And thank you to everybody for listening. And I hope you can all join us next week for the second in the series, and have a great day. Bye, everyone.